Is Bryan Kohberger a serial killer, or is the media simply labeling him as one? Before you answer that, think carefully. Does killing multiple people in a single night automatically make someone a serial killer? Or does that term require something more, something darker, something repeated over time? In November 2022, 4 college students were brutally murdered in a quiet town in Idaho. Within weeks, one name dominated headlines across America: Bryan Kohberger. And almost immediately, some outlets and online forums began using 2 explosive words: serial killer. But is that accurate? Or are we watching how public fear and media pressure can shape a narrative before a courtroom ever does? Tonight, we're breaking this down, carefully, factually, and without sensationalism. On November 13th, 2022, the small college town of Moscow, Idaho, was shaken to its core. 4 University of Idaho students, Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, Zana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, were found stabbed to death inside their off-campus home. The brutality of the crime stunned the nation. There were no signs of forced entry. 2 surviving roommates were in the house, and for weeks there was no arrest. Then in late December 2022, police arrested Bryan Kohberger, a criminology PhD student studying criminal justice. The irony: a man studying crime, now accused of committing one of the most disturbing mass murders in recent U.S. history. But here's where things get complicated. The charges against Kohberger are for 4 counts of first-degree murder. A single event, 1 location, 1 night. So why are some people calling him a serial killer? Let's break down what that term actually means. The phrase serial killer carries enormous psychological weight. When we hear it, we think of calculated predators. We think of patterns. We think of killers who strike, disappear, and strike again. But legally and criminologically, a serial killer is generally defined as someone who murders 2 or more victims in separate events with a cooling-off period in between. That cooling-off period is key. It suggests planning, psychological reset, and repetition over time. Now let's compare that to the Idaho case. The 4 victims were killed in one house, during one night, in a continuous event. That fits more closely with what's known as a mass murder: multiple victims in a single incident. So technically speaking, based on publicly available information, Bryan Kohberger does not meet the classical definition of a serial killer. But here's where ambiguity creeps in. Some argue, if someone kills 4 people intentionally, doesn't that show serial tendencies? Could there have been previous crimes we don't know about? Does intent matter more than timing? And this is where speculation becomes dangerous, because suspicion is not proof, and allegations are not convictions. Criminal profiling experts often look for specific behavioral markers when identifying serial killers: repetition over time, escalation of behavior, psychological gratification, cooling off periods, distinct victim selection patterns. Now, what do we know about the Idaho case according to the probable cause affidavit released by investigators? DNA evidence allegedly linked Kohberger to the crime scene. Cell phone data allegedly placed him near the victim's residence multiple times before the murders. Surveillance footage reportedly showed a white sedan matching his vehicle near the house. But none of this suggests a pattern of killings over time. There is no public evidence of prior murders linked to him. No confirmed history of violent crimes. No known previous victims. That doesn't mean authorities didn't investigate that possibility. They did. Law enforcement reportedly examined unsolved cases across the country to see if any connection existed. As of now, none have been publicly confirmed. So if there's no pattern, no separate events, no cooling off period, why does the serial killer label stick? Because psychologically, the crime feels bigger than a single event. 4 young lives lost, brutal stabbing, late-night attack, a criminology student suspect. It feels like something out of a serial killer documentary. But feeling like something doesn't legally make it that. Here's where things become critically important. Labeling someone a serial killer before conviction can have major consequences. First, public perception. Once the public adopts a label, it's nearly impossible to remove it. The word serial killer triggers fear. It triggers moral outrage. It triggers assumptions of long-term predatory behavior. Second, jury bias. Pretrial publicity is a real legal concern. If potential jurors are exposed to sensational language, it can influence their subconscious opinions before evidence is presented. Defense attorneys often argue that excessive media labeling can compromise the fairness of a trial. Third, presumption of innocence. Under U.S. law, a defendant is presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Not probably guilty, not socially condemned, not internet convicted, legally innocent. And that distinction matters, especially in a case that could potentially involve the death penalty. There's also another uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the serial killer label makes a story more clickable. It amplifies fear. It drives engagement. It fuels documentaries, podcasts, and endless speculation threads. But justice is not entertainment, and real lives, including the victims and their families, are affected by how narratives are shaped. Now let's be fair. Some people argue that if further evidence ever revealed prior killings, the classification could change. And yes, definitions can evolve if new facts emerge. But as of the current public record, this case is being prosecuted as a quadruple homicide in a single event. That matters, because language shapes how history remembers cases. Was this a mass murder? Was it targeted? Was it something else entirely? Those answers belong in a courtroom, not in headlines. So, is Bryan Kohberger a serial killer? Based on the traditional definition and currently available public evidence? No. He is a suspect charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder stemming from one alleged incident. That is already horrifying enough. The loss of Kaylee, Madison, Zana, and Ethan does not need sensational labels to be tragic. At this stage, facts matter more than fear. Due process matters more than speculation. And justice must be guided by evidence, not headlines. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think the term serial killer applies here? Or do you believe it's too early and legally inaccurate for us to use that label? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you appreciate deep, fact-based, balanced true crime analysis, not just sensationalism, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Because here we focus on evidence, not hysteria. And in cases like this, that difference matters. If you want, I can now.